Come here today to pay my respects to all the brave soldiers. Thousands of gravestones, mostly for British soldiers. Manchester Regiment, Royal Artillery, the Gordon Highlanders, Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire Regiment. You can imagine being a soldier during World War II, during the early 1940s. I'm thinking you probably got a pretty good deal with everything kicking off in Western Europe. Battles going on your doorstep, France and Holland being occupied, and Poland obviously and the other countries. And you think I've got a pretty sweet deal here in Southeast Asia. Somebody's also injured today. You would more than likely be maintaining the British fortress in Singapore, or maybe working in Myanmar. But Japan also started attacking, expanding its territory, just like Nazi Germany. They wanted more supplies, more trade routes, more power, a vaster empire. So they started spreading out into different parts of Southeast Asia, here in Thailand, Myanmar, Malaysia, what is now Indonesia. But we thought we were safe, even though we were withdrawing a lot of our troops, a lot of our ammunition, a lot of our supplies, a lot of our boats and planes from the Southeast Asia area, so that we could fight the war in Europe. They left us a week. We thought there was no chance anyone would ever attack our stronghold in Singapore, but of course that's what the Japanese were counting on. I think that's exactly what they did. They went through the jungles, over the seas, and smashed Singapore. It was Britain's greatest military defeat in probably history. Certainly at the time anyway. Can't think of one that's been worse. I guess the war in Afghanistan didn't go as planned. Look how many graves there are, it's gone forever. Anyway, within days Britain surrendered and the other allies surrendered their territory in Singapore. They just wanted to focus on the war in Europe. But if you were out here, that means you're going to get captured. The Japanese captured up all the British soldiers, all the Allied soldiers, plus a lot of Asian soldiers who were fighting against them. Thailand didn't really want to get involved in the war. They just let them occupy them with no resistance, because the Japanese army were powerful. So when they took the prisoners of war, they were merciless, ruthless. They hadn't signed the Geneva Convention Treaty. That meant they could do anything they wanted with the soldiers. They didn't have to agree to treat them with any human rights. And they definitely didn't. They set about building a railway line because they were trying to transport goods around the coast of Thailand to get to Myanmar or Burma or Laos. And it was taking ages, plus the few boats and planes we did have left were sinking all their ships. We had some submarines still, some planes, so that's all we could do is cut off the supply chain to disrupt them a bit while we focused on the war in Europe. However, they needed men to do that. They wanted to build a railway line that cut straight, didn't have to go around the coast. They could cut straight through the country and get a direct line on the train. However, the reason they'd never built a train line through there, the British had thought about it before, was it was impenetrable forest, rainforest, rock, cliffs. It was a real tough job. They didn't have cranes and JCBs and things back then. So they used all of the prisoners of war, many of whom were British, many of whom are now lying in this graveyard, to smash through a train line, smash a route through so they could build a train line. They were given measly proportions, like they were asked to move probably a ton of rock a day, every 24 hours, and they would have to work between 18 and 23 hours a day in the boiling hot sun. Even with the cloud cover today, it's, you know, sweating just walking around. And they were given a measly little bowl of rice, so that level of energy does not contribute to making that much movement of rock. I guess they could have fed on some other things that were in the jungle, eggs, birds' eggs, insects, but very little protein, just a little bit of rice. Anyway, this continued. They dug their way all the way through. Many people died, the bloodshed. I was going to go to Hellfire Pass today, which is like the most famous bit of difficult digging, but I just thought I'd stick locally. I'm being a bit lazy. because I've got a big day tomorrow. Yeah, they smashed their way through. They built the train line, and the reason the Japanese treated them both badly is because of the intensity of the Japanese training. They had at the time their most honoured ever ruler, Emperor Hirohito, who did not respect quitting. They're not quitters, man. So when we surrendered to the Japanese, they thought it was like we were cockroaches, rats, vermin, and they treated us as such. However, they did, of course, surrender themselves eventually, but it took 2 nuclear bombs dropped on civilian locations, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, of course. The reason that none of the other countries joined in to fight against the Japanese during this time is because they'd seen what happened in Pearl Harbour. Seeing the Americans get decimated did not encourage them to want to have a fight. So the Japanese ruled this area for a few years, and then of course the end of World War II came with the dropping of those 2 atomic bombs, and those British soldiers still alive probably would have gone home, but they probably would have suffered with dysentery, diarrhea, sickness, starvation. So I doubt they lived much, even if they did make it home, I doubt they lived very much longer. I'm sure there are examples of people who did, but for the majority who actually had their bodies picked up, this is where they would have ended up, or in similar cemeteries that are along the Hellfire Pass route where the train line was built. We'll go over in a minute to see the museum and of course the train line itself, the bridge over River Kwai. Despite the inhumane conditions they were treated with, the Japanese did have a lot of respect for the dead. Very strange juxtaposition of facts there. They logged every death, and they look after the bodies. I will make you a name and a praise among all people of the earth when I turn your captivity before your eyes, saith the Lord. So after this I went over the road to the Death Railway Museum, which had a lot of interesting information that I didn't previously know. You're not allowed to film in there, so I just took a few photographs, but this is the amount of food they were given. This is like the carriageway over to where they started digging in Rangoon. This is a diorama of how it would have lived. There's a really amazing diorama. It's made of the Dutch. This is another model. They've given you need like 4,000 calories a day if you're going to work in manual labour, and they were given way less than 2,000. That just showed you that 6,904 British troops go. Each one of these nails or railroad spikes is worth 500 dead soldiers that worked on it. The hospital wards were horrendous. The volunteers that went to work in the hospital were very brave, because they weren't trained medical staff, but they wanted to help their friends, and obviously risking their own personal safety in doing so. I also found out that they started bombing the train line. The Allies had just recently invented how to navigate bombs, so they hit their target, and they were bombing the train line while the prisoners of war were still working on it. I also learned a bit more about the horrible treatment. Basically, the Japanese army was so brutal that there'd be like a top-down bullying system, a bit like how all bullying works. So the people at the bottom were getting so much abuse from their higher ups that they obviously were taking it out on the prisoners. Systemic bullying, just feeding the way down the train, and then the people in charge of the building were getting more pressure. More people started dying towards the end because of the weather. So in 1943 most people died, and as the weather changed, the weather changed like to monsoon season, which means more sickness, more diarrhea, more vomiting, more parasitic diseases, more wounds getting infected, and more people dying. So by 1944, by the time they started bombing the bridges, people were so sick they could hardly move, and yet they were still being asked to work 20 hours a day in ferocious manual labour. I'm afraid the War Museum's either been moved or closed. So we're walking back down the long road. Danger of being run over and of being attacked by stray dogs, but apart from that, all good. To see all those starving people, I thought it'd be very important to get some calories in me, so I got some chocolate cake. It was amazing. But yeah, very sad day. Rest in peace, soldiers. Respect.